All right, so it's great to see all of you once again. We are in the middle of chapter 39, page 455, and we're in the section, the topic of Kavanah intention, why it's so important, and so within the topic of why it's so important, okay, uh, part of what makes it so important is uh, how far the spirituality, the mitzvahs, the Torah that you do, how far it reaches. Okay, that's part of it. So that's the discussion of chapter 39. Chapter 38 was more of a topic of are you going to be like an animal? You're going to be like a person, which it dovetails here as well. But the focus was on the focus in this chapter is about how far does your Torah and mitzvahs reach? How much what type of length, what type of distance it can go. So we started off last week discussing the idea that there are two modes of service of God. Well, I should say we in chapter 38 we established the idea that what is kavanah, what is intention. Intention doesn't just mean knowing what you're saying, knowing what you're doing, but it means why are you doing it? What is the driving engine why you're doing it? And the answer has to be a love and awe of God, a desire for connection to God. Now, in our love and awe of God and our desire to connect with God, there can be two different reasons why we would do that. One can be based on a meditative contemplation that really just brings out our inner and innate desire to connect to God. And then there is a higher layer, which is when I don't just try to tap into my innate love of God, but I am actually meditating to the point where I'm creating new feelings of love and awe to God based on my understanding. So through studying about God and studying really Kabbalistic ideas, but as we'll see, Kabbalistic ideas as Hasidic philosophy describes it, and today's class may be a primary example of that. You come to greater appreciation for God, and that creates a love and awe of God, which is well beyond your natural feelings of love and awe of God. And so we said, if you're going to connect to God, hi Ari, we said if you're going to connect to God just based on your school's out, if you're going to connect to God just based on your natural feelings, then that is going to be a love of God that is kind of animalistic. Not animals are bad, but animals, so to speak, are nature. Okay, they live and survive on nature. It's just they do what their instincts tell them. Okay, so if we just rely on our natural love of God, it's kind of like our instinctive love of God. Sure, it takes effort to bring it out, but it's more animalistic in nature. And then we are stuck at a love of God that is considered animalistic. Okay, it's still very good. As we mentioned last week, angels are also called animals because the angels have a love of God that is animalistic, so to speak. It's natural to them. So it's still very good, but it's not what's going to be the second level, which is when we not only rely on our natural love of God, but we work on our feelings towards God. That is called the human love of God, and that is a much greater love of God. Now, and we discussed at length last time. You can look at last class; it's all recorded online. And I myself sometimes need to review these topics as well. Um, then in last week's, so with that idea in mind, we said that there are four spiritual worlds. Okay, there are four spiritual worlds. There's an Atzilut. That's the world that it is a world. Um, Therefore, it's separate from God, but it's like an emanation of God. It's almost like an extension of God, okay? It's very much connected with the God. The language we used last week was it is an is, but it doesn't know it's an is. Okay, if that makes any sense. So it is an is, but it doesn't know it's an is. Then we have the world of Bria, the world of creation, which has a basic idea of knowledge that it is separate, but it still very much feels connected to God. Then we have the world of Yitzirah, the world of formation, the world where we take it's more a world of uh, it's a world where we're much different than God. 1 second, let me just message. This is a security call. I just want to make sure. It's texting. I'll see if he messages me as an emergency. Okay. Um, So, people have a knack to call me always when I'm giving a class. It's incredible. It's like my phone could be quiet for hours, then I start giving a class, and then the phone starts ringing off the hook. Okay. Um, so there's the world of the Yetzirah, the world of formation. Okay, it's where we become even more separate from God. And then there's the world of Asiyah, the world of actualization, which is this world. And okay, no, not an emergency. Okay. So we described last week that the world of uh Bria is the first world where creation starts to become separate. It's the world of thought. It's the world of the thought process. That is why when we have a love of God that is based on a thought process, it goes to the world of Bria, which is the second highest world. If, however, we have a love that is based on our innate nature, it goes to the world of Yetzirah, which is more connected to the emotions. Okay, that's where the emotions shine more. So that was last week. So in short, what we said I shouldn't say last week, it was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. In short, what we said a few weeks ago is if we have a love of God that is only based on our innate feelings, obviously we need to do work to bring it out, as discussed in chapter 18 and 19, but we're just trying to tap into our innate, our pintaliyid, as we say, the little Jew inside of us, little soul inside of us. Then we would be having the animalistic love of God, which would only reach the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, which is the world of emotions. However, if we have a love of God that is based on uh, actual work, where we work to think about God, then we will get to the word of Bria. Now, there is an exception to this rule. And the exception to this rule is that on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh, so Rosh Chodesh is also a holiday, on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh, the souls in heaven are allowed to go up a level. Okay? So um, that means even if you serve God in this world only with innate nature and love of God, your soul will be able to go higher on Shabbat. And so the question is why? Why is Shabbat? Well, we know why Shabbat. Shabbat's a special day. But how if someone only served God with their innate feelings of love towards him, how could they be elevated to a world where they don't belong? Okay? And the answer is, well, let me focus first on the first point. When we go to heaven, what exactly do we spend our time doing? Okay, because I started off talking about, these souls that serve God this way go here, these souls that serve God this way go there. So let me just give you a backup. What am I talking about? What am I talking about? The souls are here, then they move up. They're in this world, then they're in that world. So what happens when we go to heaven? When we pass away, we go to heaven. We are placed in a certain world. There are the four different worlds. And based on our service of God, that's where we're put. Because the world to come after we pass away is a reward for whatever we did in this world. But as I always say, God's rewards, or not as I always say, but God's rewards are much more of consequences of our actions than they are rewards. They are rewards, but they're also consequences. Meaning, if you served God with love and awe of God in this world, you will be able to feel that in the world to come. That's the reward. The reward is having the full feeling of whatever you accomplish in this world. So in this world, because of our bodies, we are limited in the feelings of connection to God that we can get here on this earth because our body drags us down. When a soul is uninhibited, those feelings are much stronger, much more acute, and much more pleasurable. The soul is not thinking, well, do I enjoy this prayer or do I enjoy a bowl of soup better? The soul doesn't have those feelings, doesn't want soup, okay? The soul enjoys God. That's its pleasure, okay? Many of you have had spiritual moments which you enjoyed, but they're always tapered and limited by the fact that we're a body. And so, number one, we're going to compare it to our physical pleasures, and number two, it's going to be limited. The pleasure that a soul can experience in the world to come is infinitely greater than this world. It says that 1 hour of bliss in the Garden of Eden is greater than a full life of bliss on this earth. So you can go on the greatest cruise ships and see the greatest things and watch the funniest videos and see the greatest comedians and listen to the best music on this earth. You could spend your entire life, 100 years, doing all that. And the sages tell us whatever pleasure you get will not even be worth 1 hour of being in the Garden of Eden in heaven. Okay, so just think of it in that way. This world is a limited pleasure based on the physical constraints that God gave to this world. The pleasure that we can experience in this world is limited. So when we go to heaven, what happens is our soul becomes whatever. I'll skip that word. Like I said, when we go to heaven, our soul becomes released and it gets to experience pure pleasure, joy, basking in the divine light. Now, if that doesn't sound exciting to you, that's okay because we're bodies and we would rather sit and understand that we go to heaven and we get to sit in a kosher deli all day and be able to eat whatever we want without worrying about our sodium. Okay, that sounds exciting to some of us. Okay. But when we get to heaven, our souls will not care about kosher deli. That's the reality. Your soul will not care for kosher deli or whatever other things that you experience on this earth. The only things that you will continue to care about are the spiritual things that you enjoyed in this earth. Those will continue. But when you get to heaven, those spiritual things are much greater. However, you can only experience spirituality in the world to come based on whatever you experienced in this earth. Okay, so it has to be, in other words, whatever you experience here on this earth, you can experience it in the world to come in a much greater way. But if you never experienced it, then you will not be able to experience it in the world to come. So I'll just give a simple example. Let's say the mitzvah of putting on tefillin or the mitzvah of lighting Shabbat candles, okay? There is a great spiritual divine light that happens when we do those things. We may not feel it here on this earth. When you go to heaven, you will be able to experience that divine light in a much greater way. However, someone who never put on tefillin or never lit Shabbat candles will not be able to tap into that. Okay, they will not be able to tap into that light because they never did it. They will not be able to enjoy it. Or let's give another example. Let's say your study of Torah. So you study the weekly Chumash, you study the weekly Torah portion. Now, the weekly Torah portion can be understood on a much deeper level in the world to come. But if you never study the weekly Torah portion, you will not be privy to the deeper meanings of that section of study because you never studied it. So you don't get to enjoy that item at a much deeper level. Okay, so let's put it this way. In a typical reward system, the reward is not inherently connected to the deed. Okay, it's like we tell our kids, if they clean up a table, they'll get presents, they'll get prizes, they'll get money, whatever they get, right? They'll get a star, and then they could buy presents. So there's no inherent connection between what they did and what they're enjoying. Okay, but that's not how God works. God, you in reward, the reward is what you did, and as well as punishment, by the way, is also what you did. So we don't view punishment the same way. Punishment is really God cleaning you up. So when you go to purgatory, it's just the cleansing process of the sins that attach to you that need to be rolled off of your body. Yes.
But Rabbi, wouldn't you think that God, even though we didn't do it on this earth, that God would want us to experience all the things that maybe we couldn't experience on this earth at a higher level? It seems a little contradictory in a way that just because you didn't do it here, you won't appreciate it or won't be able or won't have the meaning, up in heaven and Gan Eden, etc. It just it's unfulfilling. It seems empty to me. It seems like, oh my goodness, just because I didn't do something here, I won't be able to do it there. It seems like God would want you to do it there, want you to experience it anywhere to be closer to Him. Just like the angels. So, even though you're not angels at that point, or whatever we are, we're just souls, you would still think God would want our soul to want to do more, not just say, oh, you didn't do that there, therefore you can't do it here.
Well, the good news is if you didn't finish everything, you get to come back again.
I
So
see. Oh,
we
that's true. That's true. But then but
we
that's
are told,
eternal.
by the way,
That's a recycling. That's a recycling.
yeah. So no, but more seriously, we're told that every single soul has to for the soul's completion, must complete and do all 613 commandments. And that's why we keep coming back. Eventually, we'll complete it. So it's possible, by the way, that you do one mitzvah in this lifetime and you've completed all your 613. You don't know. So therefore, I say don't take a risk. Try and do as many as you can. Okay? But we don't we I don't know. God's keeping track. I'm not keeping track. He's got the ticker. But he wants our soul to be elevated. The world to come is a world of reward. It's not a world of action. There's no free will there. So you can't bask in the enjoyment of I don't know if I want to say there's no free lunches, but I guess maybe that's the way it is. The reward is to enjoy the work that you've done. That's really what it is. The reward is to enjoy the work that you've done. That's why the Mishnah says, "Schar mitzvah mitzvah." The reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. So there's many different meanings of it, but at a level, the explanation of that Mishnah for what we're learning here is the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. When you get to heaven, you will enjoy that mitzvah itself. That mitzvah itself will be your reward. That it's a literal meaning of the Mishnah.
So let me take it one step further. If you
Yeah.
put tefillin on once, and the guy next to you puts tefillin on every day, is there going to be a difference of how you experience putting on tefillin then?
So the answer is I'm going to have to guess here.
Yeah.
Okay. So
See,
accept an educated guess here. I can only say definitively things that I have read. So I haven't read. What I can tell you is I do know that someone who has never put on tefillin versus someone who put on tefillin once is a big difference. Okay. It is in Kabbalah in the Kabbalists, it has a name for it, the karkafta dilemma of tefillin, a skull that never put on tefillin. It's a very big thing to get someone to put on tefillin at least once. Um, which based on what we're learning here, that makes sense, right? But that being said, I would have to imagine that the answer is I'm not sure. It could really depend on the quality and the surrounding uh, life that surrounds those choices that led to you putting on tefillin. So, as we're discussing here, what defines the enjoyment you experience in the world to come is also the kavanah that's involved. I don't know. So I can't say maybe someone who put on tefillin for 50 years but did it without any kavanah versus a person who put it on their deathbed with a lot of feeling. Who am I to judge? I can't say. So what I'm saying is I can't really give you an answer. I would say you should want to try and put on tefillin every day and try to upgrade, your feelings with it as well. But I couldn't give a definitive answer because I think there's so many factors here at play that I would leave it up to the true judge, God.
I
If
have
that
a
makes any sense.
I have a
Yes, Esmeralda.
what if the person didn't put on the film because they couldn't, like let's say they are disabled, and even if they have someone that helped them do it, it's still they are not doing with Kavanah because they are disabled, they don't know what they're doing. So how it works in that case?
So here we have a more general question, which is disabled people, mentally disabled, I'm assuming. Um,
Well, physically and mentally, somebody that yeah,
yeah. I guess
either
I
way.
guess that's both true, right? Someone doesn't have an arm, right? They can't put on tefillin on their arm. So the rule is you are patur. In those cases, you are exempt from needing to do that mitzvah. Okay, so in a case where someone cannot do a mitzvah, they are exempt from doing it. So, but
So
then you're asking a good question. Okay, so great. So they're exempt, but what about? But I mean, like, but they
It's like
want to do it, right?
we're exempt from doing sacrifices because
Yeah.
we don't have a Beit Mikdash. So
Very good. Yeah, that's a good point. Like even today, we're exempt from bringing sacrifices. So, we say prayers that are instead of the sacrifices. That's what the verse says. Um, so your question is though, how do you get reward for something if someone's disabled? And here again, I'm gonna throw the ball back to God. Okay, and what I mean by that is I'm gonna assume that most people have come here on this earth multiple times, and I really don't know, but I'm again going on a limb here. This person that's disabled right now, probably in a different life, already did those mitzvahs. They're here currently on a different mission. I can't tell you exactly what it is. This is just a guess. Okay. There is another concept, and the reason why I say it's just a guess, there is another concept which is called machshava tova kadosh baruch hu matzar for l'maisa. That's why I was asking: is it someone who's mentally disabled, or is it someone who's physically disabled? So there's a general concept called machshava tova kadosh baruch hu matzar for l'maisa. A good thought, God considers it as if you did it. So let's say you plan to do something good and external circumstances prevented you from doing it, God considers it as if you've done it. Okay? So let's say you hear there's a homeless person somewhere and they need a hot meal. You get in your car, you travel there, and 5 minutes before you get there, the person leaves. Okay? So 5 minutes before you get there, the person leaves. So you took all the effort that you could to get it done. It's the person that prevented you. Or let's say you want to put on tefillin, but you can't because you don't have an arm. Okay? So those are all examples which we call, or let's say someone's, has, there's a famous story. We can go back to the famous story. There's a famous story of Reb Zusha and Reb Melech. There was two Hasidic Rebbes. They were one time accused of stealing. They didn't steal, but they were accused of stealing. They were thrown in prison, and they wanted to daven mincha. They wanted to daven afternoon prayers. Unfortunately, in the middle of the room was a chamber pot, and you're not allowed to pray in a room with a chamber pot. It smells, it's stinky. You're not allowed to pray. So one of the brothers was crying. He says, "Oh my gosh, we cannot pray." So the other brother said, "Hey, listen, the same God that told us we should be davening mincha now, the afternoon prayers, is the same God that tells us that we shouldn't pray right now. So that means right now, by not praying, we're serving God. By not praying, we're serving God. So let's be happy because we have to serve God with joy." And so the two brothers got up, they started dancing because they were serving God by not praying. And then they're dancing in a prison, excitement. Everyone else starts dancing. And then the prison guard shows up and he asks one of the prisoners, he says, "What's going on here?" He says, "I don't know what's going on, but those two rabbis were there. They were pointing at the chamber pot and they started dancing." The soldier says, "That's it. No, no, no dancing in this prison." And he takes the chamber pot out of the room and the rabbis are able to pray. So that's the story as it goes. But the point of the story is that I was bringing for here is here you had two great rabbis who wanted to pray. They planned to pray, but they were prevented by no fault of their own from praying. And therefore they realized that at this point, by not praying, they're serving God. So one can say, possibly, to answer the question, if someone is being prevented physically from doing, by something God gave them, it's possible that we will employ the concept of machshava tova kadosh baruch hu matzar l'maisa. A good thought, God attaches it to the deed. And I just want to say, I actually had a discussion yesterday. I spoke to, there's a hotline. Okay, when Judaism has certain views when people are sick towards the end of their life, rules about prolonging life or not prolonging life. It's very complex laws. We gave a course on it once, Jewish medical ethics, I think. I don't remember the exact course. But anyways, definitely in Judaism, we keep people alive longer than maybe many others would. And so the question is, what is the person gaining? So obviously, it's not really a question we need to answer because that's for God to worry about. But it's a question even religious Jews want to know when their family member is being kept alive, okay, not through heroic measures, but simple measures, oxygen or feeding tube, and there's no quality of life. What's being gained? What is being accomplished? And again, you can say we don't need to know; it's up to God. But the one thought that this rabbi shared with me, I was talking to him, as he said, there's a concept called what we just spoke about. When you machshava tova kadosh baruch hu matzar l'maisa, is we know that when someone wants to do a good thing, they're being prevented from doing it. God deems it as if they're doing it. Conversely, if you have a thought to do something bad and you try to do it, but you're prevented from doing it, God does not consider as if you've done it. So let's say you want to steal from someone, and for no fault of your own, you were prevented from stealing. Okay, God does not consider as if you stole. But with good deeds, it works like that. So if you have someone who lived a general life, an honorable life, okay, but all of us make mistakes. When they get to a point in their life where they can no longer do any more actions, we look at them like this. We say, if they still were able to do things, they would still be doing good things. They might still be doing not good things also, but they would be doing good things. Well, the good things they would have been doing, we consider as if they're doing them. The bad things that they would be doing, we don't consider as if they're doing them. So every moment the person is alive, they're gaining eternal reward and eternal merit in the world to come. So it's just an interesting way of looking at it. Again, it's food for thought. It's a whole another long, complex concept and topic, but it adds to the topic we're talking about here, to this idea that maybe sometimes, yes, we're prevented from doing something, but God will consider it as if we have done it. Any follow-up questions before we finally take a look at the text? No? Okay. These are really, I enjoy the questions. They're good questions, and I don't always have the answers, and that means they're very good questions, which is good. Um, because we're talking about very deep things, and sometimes we get into topics that we don't necessarily know, and so I don't ever want to claim that I know. I can only tell you my educated guess, as they say. Um, anyway, so to summarize, we have said that we can only enjoy in the world to come the rewards of what we have done in this world. So, with that being said, if I only served God with a natural love of God in this world, that means in the world to come, I will only be able to enjoy the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, which is the world of nature, the world of emotion, as opposed to the world of Bria, which is the world that's created through thought process. Okay. But we said on Shabbat and Yom Tov, I can go up a level. I can elevate myself. So the question is why? What did I do on this earth if I only serve God with my natural love, with my pintaliyid, with my inner divine soul? How can I go in the world to come a layer higher? And the answer is because there is still something unique on this world, even when we serve God with our natural love of God, and that is the element of choice. That means even when I serve God with my natural love of God, I'm still better than an angel. Why? Because I had to still choose to tap into my natural love of God. Okay, I'll say that again. I had to choose to tap into my natural love of God. So, um, angels are always stuck, or most angels are always stuck in the world of Yitzhirah, the world of natural love of God, because it's not something they choose, it's something that they naturally are. In reward for the fact that we choose on this earth to even tap into our natural love of God, God is going to give us the reward and the benefit on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh of elevating our souls to a higher level. I just want to connect this to something interesting as well, just an interesting tidbit. In Jewish practice, we don't visit graves typically on a Shabbat, on a Rosh Chodesh, or on a holiday. Why? Well, now you're getting a little bit of the idea. On Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and holidays, our souls and our loved ones in heaven are elevated to a higher level. So they're not really present in their grave on those days. That's why we don't visit them because we don't want to bother them. They're on an elevated plane today. Like we don't want to pull them back down. Let them have their day off. Let them enjoy their day. So it's just an interesting tidbit to know. You should look at the calendar before you visit a gravesite. Now, it does say if there's no other day to visit, your loved one would prefer you visit then. So let's say you're coming from out of the country. The only day you can visit. You're coming from out of state. The only day you can visit is Rosh Chodesh. The only day you can visit is the holiday. Obviously not driving there, but the Chol Moed, by all means do it. Okay. But generally, one should stick away from visiting a gravesite on Rosh Chodesh and on Shabbat and on holidays. Interestingly enough, there's a custom to visit graves on Erev Rosh Hashanah, as well as every Erev Rosh Chodesh. The Rebbe would go to the Ohel every Erev Rosh Chodesh. Right? Rosh Chodesh, you wouldn't go, you go the day before Rosh Chodesh. So, now, but there's a concept that when you visit a Rebbe, you can go every single day. You visit a tzaddik, you can go any day. But that's a separate thing. My point is for regular souls, just an interesting tidbit, as we're seeing here, regular souls get elevated on Rosh Chodesh and holidays, so it's best not to visit them on those days. So here's an interesting place where Jewish practice dovetails with a Kabbalistic meaning of it. And so I always love these things, is where we see how Jewish law and Jewish mysticism intersect. Anyways, let us go now into the text itself that I've just been saying. Is that on Shabbat we get a bonus? So let's read here. So he says, ordinary souls cannot enter the world of Bria, right? That's the second, right? The highest world is the world of emanation. Then there's the world of creation. It's the world which is based on the Binah, the understanding of God. Ordinary souls cannot enter Bria except on Shabbat and the new moon or Chodesh, where all worlds are elevated up a rung. And even ordinary souls are able to ascend through the channel which passes from the lower Garden of Eden to the higher Garden of Eden. So just imagine a nice elevator. In between, there's a channel that can bring you up from one to the next. Amud literally means a pillar. So all the worlds are connected and you can go up the pillar. I imagine it like, sorry, my brain likes to, make everything more physical. So I imagine it like, you go to the bank and the teller, they have that thing, you press the button, whoosh, it goes right up. Just imagine, the soul's going up. All right, on Shabbat they all go up. Okay. Anyways, so the higher Garden of Eden being the world of Bria, and when these souls pass to the higher Garden of Eden, they're able to take pleasure in God and enjoy a ray of divine presence. So they're enjoying a ray of divine presence, which is basically the shine of the mitzvah that you did here in this earth. Now he says, the reason why the upper Garden of Eden, the highest pleasure of heaven, is to be found in the world of intellect, the world of Bria, is because there's no real enjoyment or pleasure for created intellect other than grasping with the intellect, understanding with knowledge, and recognizing with the mind whatever could be understood or grasped of the blessed infinite light, which of course can't be known but directly, but only through God's Chachma and Bina, which shines there in the world of Bria. So, what is the greatest pleasure that someone can have here on this earth? And we've spoken about this before, is that there's different pleasures that people have. But the greatest pleasure, that's why, brainiacs, right? Brainiacs generally don't enjoy this world, right? They're called absent-minded professors for a reason. They live in a higher plane. They enjoy the world of thought. And we all too enjoy the world of thought when we think about it more than other pleasures of life. Other pleasures of life are more acute, but the pleasure of thought is the greatest pleasure that a being with intellect can reach. And so in heaven, when we get elevated to the upper world, the world of Binah, the world of understanding, and we understand God at a greater level, well, that's a great reward. But he asks over here, but if all the worlds are elevated on Shabbat and the new moon, why don't the angels also rise to the world of Bria on these days? The reason why the souls are permitted to rise to the world of Bria above the angels, which remain in Yetzirah, even though seemingly these souls are no better than angels, as their worship is based only on innate reverence and love, not something generated using their mind. So I already gave you the answer, but the reason is why these souls are allowed to rise above Bria is because they have an advantage over angels in that their reverence and love causes the Sitra Achra within their bodies to be subdued, unlike angels which do not have a coarse physical body. Which means, let me just read the next paragraph and then I'll explain. The Sitra Achra, the other side, is subdued both when they turn away from evil, overcoming and breaking free from their desires, as well as when they do good, as mentioned above. So he's saying, because on this earth we had to have that choice of turning away from evil, so that alone means it's not 100% nature. In other words, an angel, their love of God is 100% nature, because they had zero choice. They were literally, they just did what they're programmed to do. They're programmed. For us, when we choose to connect to God, even in our innate love of God, that is a choice we make to turn away from spending our time watching, football or eating a cheeseburger or hamburger. Okay, cheeseburger shouldn't do anyways. A hamburger or whatever other things that we do, and that's how it is. 1 second, Mushki. Yeah. Your sister's here. All right. Just let them know I'm in the middle of class. Okay. For these souls possessed free choice to choose evil, God forbid, and instead they chose good, to subdue the Sitra Achra, to exalt the glory of the Blessed Holy One, like the advantage of light that comes from darkness, as mentioned above. In choosing good over evil, these souls exercise their free choice. In that sense, they do share at least some resemblance to the souls of Tzaddikim, since Tzaddikim developed an intellectual appreciation of God through exercising their free choice. Okay, so we have wrapped up this section of Kavanah, and we're going to go on to the next one. So, in summation, what we learned today, very long-winded, okay, because we stuck to one topic, is that we have the opportunity on this earth to connect to God in ways. Oh, sorry. Whatever benefits we get in the world to come are based on whatever we do here on this earth. Okay, the pleasure and the enjoyment. And therefore, if someone serves God only with their natural love of God, they will generally be relegated to the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, the world of emotion. However, on Shabbat and holidays, they will be elevated to the world of Bria because of their free will. Now, I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I'm pretty sure it does say it elsewhere. Those souls which are always in Bria, those souls which are always in the world of creation, the world of intellect, I assume on Shabbat, they also get elevated within that world itself. So in other words, I don't think it's only, the lower souls get to go up and the higher souls don't go any higher. The higher souls also go higher, but within the same world. So be that as it may, the lesson we want to pull away from here is, number one, is we should try to serve God with creating feelings of love and awe of God. Make sure our kavanah, right? We've said this many times, but I'll repeat. Kavanah means the intention we have to serve God sorry, what does Kavanah mean? Kavanah is what is driving us to serve God. What is driving us to do the mitzvah that we're doing, right? So one way is I tap into my inner love of God, right? I think about how I'm a Jew and I'm a proud Jew and I'll die a Jew, right? Like we saw this year Hanukkah, right? I think that's the inner love that every Jew had. The Penteliad showed up this year Hanukkah, right? Every Jew saw what happened in Sydney. That is our natural love of God that came out. And God loves that love. It's beautiful, but it's more natural. Therefore, it doesn't get the same reward. You're stuck to the world, the middle world, the world of formation. However, if we work on our love of God, if we create feelings of love towards God, if the reason why we're serving God is because I thought about God, I contemplated about God, I learned as much as I could about God, and that made me have a strong feeling of wanting to connect to God, then that is a love and awe of God. The connection that's there, the reason why I'm doing the mitzvah is based on something that I worked on. That gets a much higher reward. You go to the world of Bria. And so number one we learn is we should work. That's why we need to study Hasidic philosophy. We need to work on having thought processes around why we love God. You know, people, I mean, how much do you know about God, right? Think about it. Like we talk about God all day, but how much do we actually know about God? And you might say, well, there's nothing you can know about God, right? What do you mean? What do I know about God? I can't know God. It's not possible to know God. So I'm just going to go on a little tangent here because I'm a rabbi. Rabbis always go on tangents, which reminds me of a story. No, I'm kidding. But there's something called knowing what something is and knowing what something isn't. I'll say that again. There's something called knowing what something is and knowing what something isn't. We cannot know what God is, but we can know what he isn't. And by knowing what God isn't, we come to a greater appreciation of God. Okay? So, for example, Abraham, how did he come to recognize God? He said that there's a world. Somebody has to have created it. If the sun could not have created the world. So God is greater than the sun. So that's just a simple example, is as you study Hasidic philosophy, you study greater, I don't want to say levels, but greater ideas and levels of godliness. And you learn that even those elevated levels are not God himself. That creates a level of awe of God. You're like, you understand how much greater he is. Let's give an example. Another example of this idea of not knowing what something is, but knowing what something isn't. Imagine you study a piece of intellectual wisdom that Einstein wrote, okay? And you read it and you're like, wow, Einstein is brilliant. And then I tell you, that brilliant piece he wrote in second grade, okay? His knowledge is much greater than that, okay? He knows much more than that. You would have a much greater awe and appreciation for Einstein than you would have before. You could always say, well, I don't understand him. He's so brilliant. I tried to read some of his writings, right? It's the same thing here. The more you study, let me pause it, okay? Not that this is about myself, but I'm going to pause it. The more you guys come to class and you study these topics with me, I'm going to assume the more you realize how much a rabbi has to know, right? It should give you a certain sense of awe in my presence. No, I'm kidding. But seriously, again, it's not about me, right? Or in other words, we all know that certain people know more than we do. But the knowledge of what they know is greater the more you know. No, the more you know, the more you don't know. Okay? So the more we know about God, the more we know that we don't know God. And that is what creates a greater sense of awe of God. And then we have this feeling that, wow, this great, incredible, wonderful God nevertheless wants to be close to me, right? I mean, that creates a feeling of love, right? I mean, if we can imagine this God that is so incredible, so much greater than me, yet he wants to connect with me, that creates an amazing sense of awe and love and reverence towards God. If this God who is so great wants to connect to me, shouldn't I want to connect to him? So that is what it means to study about God, right? Because everybody could just say, well, we don't understand God. Yeah, you can. But that won't create new feelings of love and awe towards God. In order to create new feelings of love and awe, again, I have to repeat this again. Because God is not something we see, because God is not a being that we experience obviously, we need to think about him in order to create feelings towards him, right? In other words, chocolate cake, you don't need to think about it too much. You can taste it and then you can love it. In order to have feelings towards God, we need to contemplate. And so one can have very basic levels of contemplation while I'm alive. Thank God for making me alive. Sure, that works also. But that's a very, very basic connection to God. To have a full, great appreciation for God, one needs to study more about God. And that's what Hasidic philosophy is. Hasidic philosophy is, as we peel back the layers in the spiritual worlds, and we realize God is elevated well above that, that gives us a much greater feeling towards God. Someone wrote here, Kavanah is basically the fulfillment of the commandment to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. That's correct. Just the question is, what does that mean? And the answer is yes. That means that that you will connect to God because of the love and awe of God that you have in your heart. Right? Because right after that verse, the Torah says, and these words that I command you today should be upon your heart, and you should be reminded between your eyes. It goes right into the Torah and the mitzvahs right after that. Okay. I'm wondering if I should go to the next topic because it's really involved, or I'm contemplating. I didn't even realize how long this part would take. The next part is too long to finish in 15 minutes. So, I really, yeah, I'm debating if I should start. I'm gonna start giving some explanation because I'll do like this. I'll give you some ideas, some thoughts. We're not gonna go into the text itself. We're not gonna read it. I might repeat myself again, but it's a complex topic that it probably would do good to hear it twice. Let's put it that way, okay? That there's a reason, as I mentioned many times, that people do not study these chapters of Tanya often, because they are the harder chapters of Tanya require a lot more Hasidic delving into the Hasidic teachings of the mysticism. So we have established that there are 4 worlds. Okay. Any questions about it before I start?
Yes, I do have a question.
Okay, go for it.
So I think we all know the definition of Kavanah and how it's supposed to be and all that. But the truth is that it is difficult, sometimes very difficult to actually have it, to actually do it. Like maybe you as a rabbi, maybe I don't know, that you grew up religious since you were a little kid. Maybe for you it's easier, but it's hard for me to have it because I do things and sometimes I do it because more for obedience towards God than because I'm actually feeling that. I'm not gonna lie, that's the truth.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and we actually it was addressed in earlier chapters of Tanya. So I want to say that being a rabbi just means you have more knowledge, doesn't mean you necessarily have more feelings. And what I mean by that is, we discussed in chapter 2, different souls come from different places. Certain souls, doesn't matter whether you're rabbi or not rabbi. You can have a very irreligious person who naturally can tap into spirituality easier, and you can have a more religious person that has a harder time. So it's not dependent on how religious you grew up. I obviously have more things I could think about because I have studied more, but feelings and mind are 2 separate things. Okay, so my mind, sure, I have more knowledge, but the heart and the feelings, that depends on the root of your soul, how easy or hard it is. What we discussed in the earlier chapters is our job is to try the best we can to create those feelings. And this goes back, the Alter Rebbe actually quoted the line that we said earlier in this class. It says, the Talmud, that someone who has a good thought, God considers it as if they had done it. And that means here as well, if you exerted yourself to the greatest of your ability to create an emotional feeling towards God, and through no fault of your own, that feeling did not come, then God considers it as if you had that feeling. Okay? So again, if you tried to create that feeling and it didn't come, because feelings are never promised, right? This is one thing we know, right? Feelings are never promised. There's no promise that we can create a feeling. We can try, but there's no promise. But God wants us to try. He wants us to at least try to create those feelings. Because this was a question that Tanya asked. And Tanya had said, how can God give a commandment to have a feeling? In other words, I can give you a commandment to do something, but how can God give a commandment to feel something? Right? How can God give a commandment to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might? Feelings are never promised. You can't. it's not fair, right? The Alter Rebbe says it's not fair to command someone to do something they can't promise that they can do. How
Right.
can we, right? So, and the
And
answer,
yeah,
right?
and especially in the case of God, like God, at least I haven't seen him, and it's difficult. It's hard to love someone that you don't see.
That's why we have mitzvot, Esmeralda.
I know, but
No,
even
no, no.
you're
But
supposed to
no,
do
right?
it
No,
with
correct. So this is
Kavanah.
so the answer is right. We need mitzvahs and kavanah. So the answer is, as the Tanya's answer is that the commandment is to exert yourself to study things that should create those feelings and meditate on things that should create those feelings. If those feelings don't come, God considers it as if you had the feelings. So the commandment is not to have the feelings, but to study and contemplate on things that should create those feelings. If those feelings come, very good. If they don't come, it's not your fault. But that's the commandment. That's how the Alter Rebbe understands the commandment. So, yes, we should do the mitzvahs even when we don't feel it. But we also should study things that should create those feelings. Whether those feelings come or not, that's not up to us. It's not always within our choice. I don't remember which chapter it was in. We did study it, and I'll try and look it up after the class and send it to you. But it is in a chapter that we studied earlier. Okay, but that's the answer. The answer is we need to spend our time. And you're right. That's exactly the point. How can we have feelings towards God if we don't see Him? Well, that's why we need to study Hasidic philosophy. That's why studying a Talmud and Mishnah and all that is good. But we also need to spend time studying about God to create our feelings towards God. It's like I'll just give an example. Someone who's suffering with
Very good.
having trust and faith in God. Well, they say, well, I don't have any trust and faith in God. Well, at the very least, you should study things that can bring you there. Okay. All right. I don't know what these
Thank
glasses
you.
are. Yes. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Any other questions before I just give a little, we'll go another 5 minutes and then, no? So, all right. We described there are four worlds. Atzilut, Bria, Yitzira, and Asyan. Maybe I should pull up on the screen here. I wonder if I have the four worlds of Kabbalah. Anyways, so we have the world of emanation, the world of creation, the world of formation, and the world of actuality, this world. Now, a world is generally a composite of multiple things. Okay, that's why we use the word world. If it was one single item, it wouldn't be called a world, right? We say every person is a whole world. Why? Because the person themselves is a composite of many different things. I wouldn't say that these glasses are a world unto themselves. They're just glasses. It's single dimensional. So a world has many dimensions to it, many different elements to it. So when we talk about this world, for example, this world has many dimensions to it. There are creatures, there are beings, there are people, there's spirituality, there's physicality, many different elements to this world. And the same thing applies in the upper worlds. The upper worlds have many different things in them. As we mentioned, every single world has the Eser Sfirot, the 10 divine, I don't know what we use the word, emanations. Let's see how we use the word Sfirot. Translation. Okay, we have the 10 emanations with which God conducts the world. Okay, so Sfirot translation is the 10 divine emanations or attributes through which God interacts with a finite world. Okay, so we mentioned that every single world has these 10 Sfirot, these 10 divine emanations with which God conducts the world. But that's not the only thing found in every world. So, for example, in the world of Yitzira, there are many souls and angels. In the world of Bria, there are souls and angels as well. Okay, so remember that every single world is a composite of multiple different things. The 10 Sfirot, the 10 emanations of every world, are the spiritual items of that world. So to give an example, in this world, the 10 divine emanations, the 10 are expressed in the Torah and mitzvahs that are in this world. Okay? Therefore, whenever we do anything good, they become subsumed within the 10 divine emanations in this world. So let's say, for example, when I study Torah on this earth, I come up with a new novel Torah idea. That idea becomes subsumed and one with the 10 divine emanations in this world. That's why the Torah I study in this earth is part of God's Torah. It's not just my Torah, right? That's why the Talmud is part of God's Torah, even though human beings wrote it, so to speak. But they're divinely inspired, and their Torah is a part of these 10 divine emanations that are found in this world. And the same thing applies to our mitzvot, the good deeds that we do. Okay, the good deeds that we do, they become a part of the 10 divine emanations of each and every single world. However, our souls do not become part of the 10 divine emanations because our souls are a creation, a separate entity. So our Torah and our mitzvos, which is not us, become subsumed within God. But we ourselves remain separate. And this, by the way, is an explanation of what it means. When we go to heaven, our mitzvos, which were part of the 10 divine emanations in this earth, continue higher into the 10 divine emanations in the higher worlds. And therefore, when we go to heaven, we can enjoy those, our Torah and mitzvos, as they are connected to those worlds. So, as it pertains to our previous conversation, when I study Torah on this earth, or I do mitzvos in this earth, with natural intention, they become part of the 10 divine emanations of the world of Yetzirah. And when I, as a soul, go to that world, I can enjoy the shine of those mitzvahs. So this is a technical explanation for what we said earlier. So, we're actually going to read this inside this part. We're not going to go, this part actually we can do. Just reading this inside. Let's read like here. So he says like this. He says, a second. Always try this. Okay, so he says like this. Now, the above discussion concerning the spiritual address of the souls, as well as the location where the souls were temporarily stationed on Shabbat and the new moon, we didn't discuss what happens to the Torah worship of the souls. The Kabbalah teaches that each spiritual world contains both A, an infrastructure, and B, a godly light that fills the infrastructure. Technical name for these are the infrastructure of the chambers and the lights of the Sfirot, the 10 divine emanations. Your soul, Tanya will now explain, can only reach the chambers of any given world, but your mitzvah, which is actually God's will, merges with the Sfirot of the divine emanations of that world. Your Torah worship rise higher than any chamber and are literally absorbed in the 10 Sfirot, the 10 emanations of the appropriate world, which are actual godliness, since the blessed divine light is merged with the Sfirot as perfect as can be. The difference between the chambers, which is where our souls are, and the Sfirot is that God's infinite light is totally merged with the Sfirot, with the divine emanations, whereas the chambers retain a separate identity. Your mitzvah, which is God's undiluted will, merges perfectly with the Sfirot, but your soul, which is a separate entity from God, must remain chambers. To be precise, the world which your worship reaches depends on whether it was inspired by contemplative work and innate soul feelings. This is all things we discussed. Through worship motivated by intellectually generated reverence and love, worship rises to the 10th Sfirot of Bria, that's world number 2, whereas love motivated by natural reverence and love, the worship rises to the level of Yetzirah, And let me just see. So, and the point, as he's going to say, is okay, and within the 10 Sfirot of Yetzirah are enmeshed the 10 Sfirot of Bria. Okay, I'm not going to go further, but his point is that because your mitzvah is enmeshed with the 10 divine emanations, and your soul will enter that world, your soul will enjoy your mitzvah that is now enmeshed with those Sfirot. So this is more of a technical explanation for everything I said. We said earlier that when we do mitzvahs in this earth, we go to heaven and we enjoy those mitzvahs. Now he's giving the more Kabbalistic understanding of that. What does that mean? When I do a mitzvah, that mitzvah becomes one with the divine light, with the Sphira of that world. Then when I go to heaven, I can enjoy that light that is already in that world. So, in this world is not a divine light. It's hard to see. But in upper worlds, there is a divine light. So, depending on what type of how your mitzvah was created, that will define where your mitzvah goes, what world your mitzvah will be in. And when we get to that world in the afterlife, we will enjoy that mitzvah. I want to say that God willing, all of us will never have to get to the afterlife, and we'll have all those divine revelations down here on this earth. That's really what Mashiach is about. Mashiach is about heaven on earth. Is that all? Everything we're talking about today will have all those things here on this earth in a very, very powerful way. So what I want you to walk away with today is, number one, is that obviously always do a mitzvah, but we need to work on our feelings of love and all towards God. Even when we're relying on our natural love towards God, it's nothing to sneeze at, because at the end of the day, we're still making a choice to do that. But we should try to create feelings of love towards God that are based on our intellect, which means we need to do more study. The more you study Torah, the more you learn. You need to study more. That's always how it goes. So that means, my friends, we need to study more and study about God and have a greater appreciation for God, create intellectual feelings towards God, and then we can enjoy and bask in that divine light, either in the world to come or in the times of Mashiach. And the reminder we have from today is to remember, whatever reward you get in the world to come is much more than a reward. It's a consequence of the actions you did here on this earth. So make sure you do good deeds here on this earth, because only what you've done here on this earth you can enjoy in the world to come. Now, I want to add, if you have loved ones, if you are doing mitzvahs, this is what we say: if you are doing a mitzvah because of the inspiration of your loved one, they benefit from that mitzvah too. That's why we always say do a mitzvah in their merit. What's the whole idea? Is not only the mitzvahs you do in your lifetime, but mitzvahs that people do after your lifetime, but they're doing it because of your inspiration. You can also enjoy that in the world to come, because that still was created through your choices. The choices you made on this earth that inspired your children and grandchildren or your students is causing them to do those good deeds. You can enjoy those as well. And it also brings an idea. That's why when you pay someone to, you're giving charity for someone who's studying Torah. Those are all ways of tapping in. So people want to know, well, do I have to study the whole Torah? When you give charity, someone else who studies Torah. Those are all different ways to tap into reward on things, even if you're not doing it yourself. If you have caused it to happen, you also get that reward. Okay. With that, I'm going to stop the recording, and I wish you all a wonderful week, and we'll see you back next Tuesday.
Yeah,